On today's Locked On Senators, we've got immediate reaction following the introductory press conference of new Sens head coach Travis Green, along with general manager Steve Staios.
And we continue our exit interviews with three dynamic forwards whose next season could have a major impact on this team.
We'll get into all that, plus it's a Belleville Sens playoff game day. That's all coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Senators podcast. Your team every day.
You're Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I'm Jake Sanderson, and you're listening to Locked On Senators podcast.
I'm Tim Stützle, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
Welcome inside episode 1041 of the Locked On Senators podcast. I'm Ross Levitan on the outskirts of enemy territory in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first ticketing purchase. That's code Locked On NHL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Terms apply. You can also follow the show on social media. We're at Sens Central on Twitter, LockedOn.Senators on Instagram. The show is free and available on all podcast platforms, including on YouTube, where we say hello and let you know that a like, comment, and subscription go a long way to helping the show grow. Today is Wednesday, May 8th, and Pilsy, lucky number 7. The Ottawa Senators will draft 7th at the NHL Draft in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, talk about an underwhelming result for live television. The draft order goes in the exact order it was set up. But at the same time, Ross, I'm not upset about this. Staying at 7. 7's a good place to be. I did my short list exercise today. Maybe I'll tweet that out later. But there are 10 players, prospects, that if the Ottawa Senators drafted them in the 7th position, I could spin zone myself into thinking that that's a great pick moving forward. So, although I would have loved to have number 2, Ross, we all know that that's what I was gunning for. 7 will work just fine.
In those 10, is Macklin Celebrini in there?
No, he's not.
So that's 11 players. And I say number 11 because the last draw was 11 that created the San Jose Sharks winning the draft lottery. If that number had been 12, Ottawa would be drafting first overall. So it's that close.
So we hate number 11 now, you're saying?
No, we certainly don't. We'll have a mock draft, a top 8 mock draft coming tomorrow on Locked On Senators. But of course, the news of today, you mentioned underwhelming draft lottery. A lot of Sens fans thought underwhelming hire the head coach, Travis Green, before they could even hear him speak. Now, I'm easily convinced, I will admit it. Number 1 from that press conference, no memes. And that's a continuation. Since Steve Staios has been over, we don't get the laugh track. We don't have things on the soundboard here. No rest is a weapon.
There was only one laughed at quote, and it was a good one.
It was good. What? When he said the first people he saw when he walked in the building was Chris Neal and then Chris Phillips. He said, I started getting nightmares.
Yeah, that was the only one, and that's a good one. I wish I could have been there for Travis Green turning the corner, and there's Chris Neal. Like, that would have been ultimate to see that. But other than that, Ross, it was a clean-cut professional presser.
Yeah, 970 games as an NHL player. It's not his first press conference. Obviously, he's coached in a Canadian market before in Vancouver and then with New Jersey. I thought Ian Mendez had a great question in the end-of-year press conference. He says, I want to be the head coach of the New Jersey Devils. Devils still haven't named their coach, but the Ottawa Senators ultimately get Travis Green. And he said, look, I had conversations with Steve Staios and with Tom Fitzgerald, the GM of the New Jersey Devils, throughout the process. And he was excited about the young core in Ottawa, feeling like there's so much potential there. You're not going to get a whole lot out of these press conferences when it's not being memed from the Dorion era or DJ. I actually went back and watched DJ Smith's introductory press conference earlier this morning just to kind of weigh it out and see kind of what to expect. There's a lot of the key buzz phrases, right? Young team, lots of growth, Canadian market, pressures of privilege, all that. But what I liked about Travis Green is he seemed very detailed in what and measured in what he wanted to say. he said, I'm not going into the X's and O's. I'm not going into all that. There's certain philosophies that he has as a coach. I liked how he said firm but fair, approachable. You got a problem with something? Come into my office. We'll talk it out. I think that's that new age mentality that you can't just rip a guy. And then if he tries to talk to you, go, nope, just fix it. There's that communication aspect that all coaches need, especially the good ones. And I think that he's going to bring that to Ottawa. I had never really heard kind of the thought process where he's being asked these questions about. I'm glad nobody was like, hey, have you seen the fan reaction? That's just kind of, I don't want to say below them because obviously the fans matter, but that initial opinion, ask the fans about the Brady Tkachuk draft pick. Just saw what happened on social media after that. There's a lot of kind of that vibe on the social medias over the last couple days since the hiring was ultimately broken by Darren Dreger a few days ago. But Ray Ferraro, who played with Travis Green a lot. I listened to Ray and Dregs yesterday. He really liked it as well. We're going to have Jamie McLennan on Friday's show. They played 6 seasons together. So we'll learn a little bit more about Travis Green. But what was your number one takeaway from this press conference, either from Staios or from Travis Green?
My main takeaway is that Travis Green is a good communicator, right? Like everything he said, you weren't left after an answer being like, wait, what? Like he was very clear. And the thing that I keep coming back to, Ross, is this is a guy that speaks with conviction. Like he believes what he is saying. And I liked his one answer. I think someone asked him like, the story about you in Vancouver is you're demanding and you're hard on your players and all these things. And he's like, I didn't learn that in Vancouver. Like that's who I am as a person. And I think that's good. And the one thing I really liked is he talked about, he's going to define roles on this team, set expectations high. You need buy-in from everyone, especially from the high-end players. And he doesn't coach every player the same. It drives me nuts, Ross, when I hear people talking about, even just in general, but more when it comes to hockey, you got to treat everyone equally. Everyone is the same. No, that's ridiculous to have that thought process. You can't be treating Connor McDavid like you're treating Connor Brown on the Edmonton Oilers, right? Like there's so different players need different things. Different players deserve different things. Like,
come on, you didn't have Tkachuk versus Tkachuk. You couldn't have gone with that.
Sure, I was just going with two Connors there. But the thing is, like, a hockey room is not a place of sunshine and daisies and it's rainbows and it's nice all the time and everyone goes in with a smile on their face. Like this is a battle atmosphere. Like guys are rising and falling, guys are having good times, bad times. You need to be able to know when to push a certain player a certain way and when not to. And he said, he was asked about being a demanding coach or a tough coach. And he's like, I don't want people to think I'm just out here barking at guys and giving guys a hard time. Sometimes being a demanding coach is realizing that your player needs a boost of confidence and getting that confidence out of him. So I really feel that this is a guy that I think can lead the Ottawa Senators to the next step. Is he the best candidate? No. Is he the worst candidate and deserves outrage? Absolutely not. And I think one thing I'll touch on what Steve Staios said here. I think it was Ian that asked the question. Fans are thinking, look, there's all these other candidates with Stanley Cup resumes and all these things. And Staios goes, well, your resume and record isn't everything. You need to look at what those situations those coaches were in. And more importantly, Staios said him and the collective group looked at the attributes of a coach rather than just the record. And I think that's what fans get. They fall into that trap sometimes. You just look at the record and you can decide how good a coach is just then and there. I think a lot of fans did that. And a lot of fans are like, oh, well, he's just DJ Smith. Look at the coaching record. That's ridiculous to think that Travis Green and DJ Smith are the same coach because they have similar records. Travis Green has the same winning percentage as Wayne Gretzky as a coach. Like, what do you want to take from that? Like, right? Like, there's a lot, you can't just look at the numbers. There's so many variables that go into this. And I think a lot of people are pointing to the fact that Travis Green, most of his NHL head coaching is in Vancouver. That franchise was in shambles when he was there. There was a power struggle going on. He had to deal with a lot of stuff.
It was actually really interesting to hear them tiptoe around just saying straight out that place was a poop show, as Tim Baines wrote in his article about the Sens under Melnick. I don't know if you saw that quote yesterday.
But that's the thing. It was just like Sens fans, we get it. Having a franchise that's in complete disarray and dysfunctional. We get that. We know how hard that could be on a coach to win during those times.
And how many times did Travis Green in the first 5 minutes mention the ownership and the stability that Michael Andlauer is going to bring from the top down?
Yeah, a bunch. And I think that's important. And, those guys are both former players. So they have a kind of a certain angle and way they want to communicate and approach the game. And I'm confident that Staios and Travis Green can build a healthy relationship together.
I would agree with that. Now, where else will we go from here? Let us know, by the way, in the comments. I'm really, really interested. And I tweeted out at Sens Central, now that you've heard from Steve Staios and Travis Green, more so Travis Green, has your opinion changed on the Sens coaching hire? Already 50 replies in the first 20 minutes, and I'm assuming that it's pretty mixed. I'm going to look through them later tonight because I am curious to know what the fan reaction is versus the immediate versus now 48 hours later after you've actually heard from the man who's in the driver's seat now. When he was asked about what's missing from this team, he just says, look, it's one thing to be skilled. It's another to be skilled and winning. And he comes from a history of developing. He was also asked about the 4-year contract Steve Staios was, and it really kind of confirmed what a couple people have told me privately, that this Senators team, like, they could push and be like where Washington was this year in terms of like making the playoffs, but like, it's going to be a longer road to be a really competitive team. Now, roster construction is going to have a lot to do with that, and all eyes are on Steve Staios. He's hitched his wagon now to Travis Green, and now what is he going to do with the roster? We'll have plenty of time to dissect that as we lead up to free agency, the draft. A lot of movement goes on around there from a player standpoint, and that's going to be the next biggest task for them. But now they're going to work in collaboration, which came up a bunch today as well, where the GM and head coach have to be on the same page. They have to see the game in a similar fashion. And that's what we're going to learn now is what kind of team does Travis Green and Steve Staios want to build? Let's remember, the only addition to this team all year long was Boris Kachuk. That's it. This was Pierre Dorian's team's last ride. Now, what's going to happen this summer? That'll tell us a lot about what expectations are on the ice. Any final thoughts on the Steve Staios, Travis Green press conference today?
The only final thought for me is I thought they didn't really clear up what's happening with the assistant coaches, Ross. I don't know, maybe you got a different impression, but they kind of talked about Alfie and Travis Green just said, look, I got a lot of respect for Alfie. Can't wait to chat with him. We've been texting a bit. But essentially, he was just like, whatever Alfie wants to do, we'll make that work, which that's what you want to hear. And then Staios didn't really touch on the assistants in a clear way either. So I've said it before, Ross, but I'll emphasize it again. I think the decisions of who's going to be the assistant coaches of this team are almost as important as who the head coach is here, because the special teams has been atrocious here, and they need someone who can turn that around.
They certainly do. Guys who Travis Green say he learned from when he was a player was Al Arbour, legendary old coach of the New York Islanders, Pat Quinn, Paul Maurice, Mike Sullivan, and Randy Carlyle, among others. So he says he's also a believer in analytics, but it doesn't run his show, works with every department. He thinks that's the sign of being a good coach, and that analytics can give you an edge. But he doesn't coach off of them. He studies them, says especially in the offseason, looks at what teams that are winning, what works for them. But he seems almost in direct contrast to DJ Smith, who's like, hey, I'm running the Tampa Bay Lightning neutral zone. What? We're not good enough for you? We're running the Tampa Bay Lightning. They're winners. But no, you have to have your own beliefs, your own systems. And that's where I think Travis Green, he's confident in his own convictions. And say that's good, say that's bad. I've got time for both opinions. But I just know that to be a successful head coach, and we've seen it all over the NHL, you have to have your own beliefs.
Yeah.
And he's got that.
Yeah. You got to live and die by your own principles. You can't be flip-flopping around or appeasing other people. You got to go to bed at night being like, I made decisions based on the way I want to do things. And I think Travis Green is going to be that guy.
Welcome to Ottawa, Coach Travis Green. Now we turn our attention to the roster and the building that needs to go on to make this a competitive team in the National Hockey League. But again, let us know on the comments on YouTube. Always a great place to let us know your opinions. Please like, comment, subscribe wherever you get your podcast. We are available on YouTube, and it does go a long way to helping the show grow. On the other side, Drake Batherson, Ridley Greg, Josh Norris. Pilsy nailed it in the intro of how important these pieces are to the Sens puzzle. We'll do that next, and then a quick game day preview against the Cleveland Monsters. It's a best of 3 for the Belleville Senators, and they are in enemy territory tonight. All that's next. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Indeed. There's no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform you need to build yours. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one simple place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills. Indeed has a hiring platform that can help you do it all. One of the things I love about Indeed is candidates you apply are 3 times more likely to apply to your job than candidates who only see it in search. Indeed does the hard work for you. It shows you candidates whose Indeed resume fits your description, and you can immediately have them look into it once you post. Even better, Indeed is the only job site where you pay for applications that meet your must-have job requirements. Join over 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offer good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit today at Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. You want to go to an event, whether it's sports, comedy, theater, go check out the prices as low as they can get over at Game Time. Game Time is our ticketing app here at the Locked On Podcast Network, and why wouldn't it be? Because it comes with so many advantages, like killer last-minute deals, all-in pricing, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Gamework takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. When you go to Game Time, you can see flash deals, get even more exclusive savings with in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. All-in pricing shows no surprise fees at checkout. Those are the worst. No surprise fees. With seats, views from your seats, panoramic views, no surprises. Oh my goodness, there's a poll right in front of me? What? Not at Game Time. Plus, Game Time is purchase covered with the most flexible customer service in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL. LOCKEDONNHL. $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, Pilsy. So we are still digesting that press conference from Steve Staios and Travis Green, and it does feel like there is a bit of relief among the fan base based on the conversations, just scrolling through the answers there as Pilsy was talking, and it's all about what's going to happen in October and November. This fan base, they're once bitten, twice shy, 3 times, 4 times when it comes to these starts and these slow starts to the season. So hopefully Travis Green has an answer for that. The last thing I want to touch on from that conversation with Travis Green and with Steve Staios, I liked it a lot how, Steve Staios, he's trying with the French. He led into the introduction of Travis Green in French, and I hope that's appreciated because obviously these guys aren't bilingual, but as they had the question at the end, they are learning and they do want to make sure, and it is noticeable, and I hope the people in Gatineau are noticing that when DJ Smith was hired, it's what he's going to bring to Ottawa. And when Travis Green, and in all the conversations, all the press releases, it's Ottawa/Gatineau. So they are trying to do their best to include the other side of the Ottawa River. I think that shouldn't go without notice. Now, not only are they talking about the regular season, but they're talking about the future. And you look around playoffs now, and Steve Stais, the last thing I want to mention on this is he mentioned that coaches who had similar coaching records to Travis Green are still coaching the playoffs now. And I think, again, that was a look at Rick Tocchet in Vancouver, which is where I keep comparing him. And then Pete DeBoer's first time coaching when he was in Florida, that didn't go well. Bruce Cassidy's first time coaching didn't go well. I know that he's a guy who's out of the playoffs, but still won the Stanley Cup last year. So these coaches, they learn along the way, and it's easy to kind of put people in boxes when you look at their records, but there is a growth potential for the 53-year-old. So I'm looking forward to hearing from Jamie McLennan on the show on Friday. We'll also get to our draft mock 1.0 tomorrow. Pillsy, any comments on that, or do you want to get right back in to our exit interviews?
Let's get to the exit interviews.
Coming up on today's exit interview, we are going to start with Drake Batherson. This is going to be about as positive an exit interview as we can get. With Drake Batherson, there was worry after the high ankle sprain. Was he going to be a guy who can stay healthy season in, season out? Now, back-to-back seasons where he plays 82 out of 82 games. Sets a career high in goals. Gets a lot of points. Plus, minus, still not great, but a lot better than last year. A lot less chilly than last year. And he's just a guy where the skill shines through every single game. He makes plays. His passing is unreal. And he's got that step back. Now, I'd still like to see him improve a little bit on the defensive end, Pillsy, but he's got that step that he didn't have for such a long time. And it's allowing him to create space for himself where he can then make plays.
Yeah, I think Drake Batherson, Ross, honestly, was sneaky, low-key, one of the most consistent players on this team. When we talked about consistent players, we talk about Sanderson, we talk about Brady, we talk about Claude Giroux, which we should. But I was looking through his game logs, Ross, and I feel like there was times last season where you and I were like, okay, Drake Batherson has to get it going here. What's going on with him, et cetera, et cetera. But the longest stretch of games where he had no points, 4 games, a 4-game stretch of 0 points. So he was able to be very consistent throughout this season. And I feel like he got knocked down by a lot of Sens fans. But for a guy who's making less than $5 million, got 66 points, career high, and who lit it up on the power play, I believe with 22 power play points, like, I don't think he was deserving of all the kind of negative attention that went his way, because he had a really consistent year, in my opinion.
And at both ends of the ice too. I mean, better at least than what we saw in the last season, where he was just still recovering. And that was more so at the start. I know about midway through the last season, he still had 22 goals last year, which was a then career high. He had 18 more points than he had in his previous season, albeit that was the one where Aaron Dell took out his ankle and he had to recover from that. But this year, yeah, it just felt top to bottom. It was consistent. He shot 14% back up to his average after a slow shooting year last year where he was under 9%. And I like him around that 18-minute mark. He's never going to be a guy, your first guy out on the penalty kill or whatnot. But for me, there's a few things that I'm hoping to see from him next year. I want to see him take another step forward when it comes to takeaways. I think that he could be one of those guys that's turning over pucks in the neutral zone that really helps the transition, because he's not going to be a guy that fast breaks too much. He's not going to be your speed demons like a Joseph or even other guys up front like Timmy and those guys, but he could be a guy. And I think Giroux's a perfect guy for Drake to model his game after, that it's all about vision, but also anticipation and knowing where your teammates are going to be and when. And I think we saw that very consistently this year from Drake Batherson. He's one of the biggest surprises, impressive to me this year. And I hope that he's just going to take another step forward and another step forward. Pillsy, last year, out of his 22 goals, 14 were on the power play. Yeah. That only left 8 at even strength. He went from 8 even strength goals to 21 this year. And that's a huge sign of good things coming for Drake Batherson. I'm expecting him to set another career high next year. One of my hot takes going into this year, Pillsy, was that he'd be a point per game. Wasn't quite there. I might have the same one. I might run it back next year, because I do think the sky's the limit for Drake Batherson. And we've been banging that drum since his, second year of junior where he had that growth spurt, or first year post draft was where he exploded offensively. And I think that the sky is the limit for him, and still on that nice contract for another few years.
Yeah, and I think Drake Batherson is going to be one of the players that really benefits from Travis Green as a coach, because you look at Drake Batherson, you see all the skills, you see the size, like at 6'3", 205 pounds. This guy should be using his body to take advantage of loose puck battles and things like that more. I think with Travis Green, you're going to get him more conditioned. You're going to get him forechecking harder, working harder in those battles, because there's no reason why a guy of his size and skill should look bad on the ice, like not going in hard for loose pucks, getting beat defensively. Like there's just no reason for it. So I really think with Travis Green coming in here, hopefully he can demand a little bit more out of Batherson, and we get him on the right side of the plus minus stat here.
Yeah, he did that once during that shortened season where he was +4 in 46 games, 44 points. But there's not a handful of players on the Senators that have more offensive talent than Drake Batherson.
Yeah, he's right up there for sure.
So what are your expectations for him going into next season?
I think anywhere in the 70-point range is where you want to see. Yeah, a plus player, and just a little more, like I just mentioned there, just a little bit more passion. I want to see him use that frame a little better, be harder on the forecheck. Yeah, exactly. So I think we're going to see Drake Batherson be in this range statistically consistently throughout the rest of his career, because this is where he can be.
3 years left at $4.95 million. Drake Batherson, a consistent member of the Ottawa Senators this year, and a guy who I believe is still scratching the surface. I'll say 70 points next season at least for Drake Batherson. I know it's a high bar to set, but if the Senators as a team are going to take another step forward, or maybe some people will say, hey, stay around that 60-70 range, but let's play a more 200-foot game, because it is a lot of offense for him. Look, this is the first year in his career where he's had more takeaways than giveaways. That's a stat that I know it's a little bit of a tough stat to really nail down. Like it's a little bit more up to interpretation of whoever's doing the stats that night, but I'd like to see that trend continue for Drake Batherson. Let us know in the comments what you thought of Drake Batherson's last season and what he could do to take another step forward going in to the 2024-25 campaign. All right. Coming up after the break, we'll get to Ridley Greg, we'll get to Josh Norris, and a quick Belleville Sens preview. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Monopoly Go. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. There's just so much good stuff about this game that you're going to love. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. It's easy, and there's so much you can get. Unique stickers that you can trade with friends so you can complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the board with. Hilarious emojis for taunting your friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton of new things like unique mini games, digging for treasure, or even a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on with Monopoly Go.
Today's episode is also brought to you by our friends with the GLEBE Central Pub. Make sure you check out the GLEBE Central Pub right in the heart of the Glebe for great food, awesome drinks, the atmosphere to match. Visit them at 779 Bank Street and let them know that Locked On Senators sent you. When you go to the Glebe Central Pub, you know you're going to get the great food, great drinks, awesome. But how about this? Every Thursday, music bingo at 7:30, also featuring $5 tacos, minimum 2 per order. And get this, there's prizes to be won. Music bingo. What a blast at the Glebe Central Pub. It's just one of their many interactive events that they do at the Glebe Central Pub. Live music every Saturday is such a great vibe. Victor Nezrella will be there this Saturday, May 4th, 9 p.m. till midnight. Go check out live music and just feel the vibes, the energy at the GCP. You know the vibes are free at the GCP, so make sure you visit them and let them know that Locked On Senators sent you. They are a local neighborhood pub. They are for the people, by the people. So make sure you go check them out. Let them know Locked On Senator sent you. I can't wait to see you again at the GLEBE Central Pub. All right, Pillsy, before we get back to our exit interviews, let's do a quick preview on tonight's game. Just give me a Locked On player, because it's been so long since the Belleville Senators played a game. Last Friday, you were at the game in Belleville, and you've probably put thousands of kilometers on your car since then, Pills. Like, how about this in the middle of a series, having 5 days off?
It feels like forever ago, Ross. This is easy for me. I don't have to think too much about this, so I'll just get to it. Locked On player, Stephen Halliday. I mean, number 17 was easily the best player on the ice for both teams in that game that I was there. And now that he's got that monkey off the back, the disher served up his first pro goal, I think he's just going to be bringing it even more. And I think we might see him elevated in the lineup as well, Ross. I'm going to be keeping an eye out for that, because Stephen Halliday has arrived in the AHL.
Still no word yet whether Zach Ostapchuk will be back in the lineup after being injured in game 1 of this series. He missed the last game, but Stephen Halliday doing a great job stepping up in the lineup. My Locked On player, Matt Sogard. He's been good, not great, and I think he needs to be great over the next 3 games. Sens have to win 2 out of 3 games on the road, and you need your goalie to be your best player in front of a raucous atmosphere. And I'm excited to get a little higher camera angle and get a little 4K maybe, or a little HD camera. It's a little bit tough to watch sometimes on the TV for Belleville, but I'm excited for that.
Hey, they do great work, the video production crew, Ross. We're not
talking about. Of course they do. Of course they do. That's us, baby. That's where we got our starts from school. So no, all good. Excited for tonight's game. We'll be tweeting it out at Sens Central tonight on Twitter, and hopefully they'll be 1 game away from the 3rd round after tonight, but we'll be following along that closely. All right, back to our exit interviews. We're going to go with Ridley Greg. Ridley Greg obviously had a highlight reel moment this season with the empty net goal against the Toronto Maple Leafs, but overall, I thought this was a very good get your feet wet campaign for Ridley Greg. How would you describe it?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely fair, Ross. Before last season, he only got 20 games in the NHL, and that was broken up into 2 stints. He had a bit of time, then he went back to Belleville, then he came back later on in the year. So not really consistently in the NHL this season. 72 games, 13 goals, 13 assists for 26 points. But what you got to love, Ross, is that plus 10 that Ridley Greg finished the season with. And he was like plus 14, 15 for most of the year. I think he just had a bit of a dip at the end of the year along with the rest of the Ottawa Senators. But for Ridley Greg, I think he's getting a bit of the Shane Pinto treatment, unfortunately, where due to injuries, most notably Josh Norris injury, he's been up and down this lineup, and he hasn't really been able to find a spot where he can stay and work on being that type of role player. I think ideally we're going to see him in a winger position on a 3rd line consistently next year, along with Matthew Joseph and Shane Pinto. I think that'd be a great line in my opinion. But Ridley Greg definitely, this was a developmental year for him. I don't think we can say it was a huge success, but I'm also not going to say it was any kind of failure as well. I think this is right around where you want Ridley Greg to be in his first full NHL season.
And he got an opportunity to play with some great players. Think back to the start of the season where Vladimir Tarasenko was his right winger. That line with Matthew Joseph was super hot right out of the gate. They were one of the hottest lines in hockey for quite a while there in terms of goals for, goals against when they were out on the ice. And I think then if you look at it, and one of the most, in terms of expected goals, the one of the best lines this season for the Ottawa Senators featured Ridley Greg on it, playing with with Brady Tkachuk and Claude Giroux. Those guys were 69% expected goals percentage through 20 games, 66 minutes of time on ice together. So there's a lot that Ridley Greg has learned with kind of going through the ups and downs and the marathon that is an 82 game season. I know he missed 10 of them, but to me, this was perfect, where it's like 3rd line has to play up a little bit more. And like, he had some rough stretches. There's no doubt about it. After he had that empty net goal, he then, I think he scored the next game, if not 2 games after. And then he went ice cold Had a little bit of a push at the end, but ice cold at the end of the season. That's fine. To me, now he has 72 games of consistent NHL video to go off of throughout the summer and get stronger. And people have to remember, this guy doesn't turn 22 years old until August 8th. Same day that Roby Arventi turns 22. And people still see him as an up-and-coming prospect, right? Like, it's easy to see them once they become NHLers that it's like, okay, now, like, where's the production? But this guy, and again, this guy, his player comparable, some people who watch 90s, 2000s hockey, like, he could be a Travis Green. I bet you Travis Green is going to love coaching Ridley Greg.
Yeah, definitely. If he could put his Leafs fandom aside and if he wasn't too upset with that slap shot into the empty net, if you're watching on YouTube, that's the picture Ross and I decided to use for Ridley Greg here. Ross, I have a question for you and a question for everyone listening and watching here because I'm very intrigued with this. Let's start at next season. Next season, Ridley Greg is a winger or a centerman?
I think he's a lot better as a centerman.
Okay, but that wasn't the question. Will he spend most of his time on the wing or at center? Now, obviously, this is an impossible question to really answer because it depends on how the offseason goes here. But I'll reframe it this way. Where do you think he would thrive better as
third
a
line center?
Okay, but you have Tim Stützle, Josh Norris, and Shane Pinto, who, knock on wood, will all be healthy at the start of the season.
Yeah, Josh Norris is playing wing for me on the second line.
Okay, well, we can get into this later. I was thinking about bringing that up as well. So that's an interesting approach that definitely
I think if you have Tim Stützle, Shane Pinto, Ridley Greg, and then a legitimate veteran fourth line center. I'm sorry, Mark Haslick, it was fun. I don't know if we can do it again. We'll see. If he's 13th forward, sure, that's cool. But I think they need like not even like a sexy name, like a Nick Dowd or like just a guy who can be like, I want a guy with at least 500 NHL games as a centerman on the team next year. Okay. I don't know if it's as a third line or fourth line center, bottom six, call it a bottom six, but Ridley's not playing on the fourth line. So there's a lot to unpack there because if they are trying to take another step, are you really going to have 22-year-old, 22-year-old, and 21-year-old as your three centermen? Well, not that Josh Norris is much older, although he is obviously, I think, 2 or 3 years older than all those guys. So he's probably 25. It's going to be interesting to see where they play him because I think you might put him on the wing. But I think as a future, like his career, he'll play more center than the wing.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. What was his face-off percentage this year? Was sitting at 43, right? That's another thing. Where do you need to put him with a Claude Giroux type where they're going to take all the face-offs for him, or most of them at least for the start? I think he's going to be bulking up this summer. I hope so, at least. I hope Ridley comes into camp, and I hope he's top 5 in fitness testing.
Yeah, well, Ross, we already know last season during the offseason, we had everybody joking around. Anytime you saw Ridley Greg, he had a protein shake in his hand and he's trying to get that weight up. So I think definitely that for Ridley Greg to play the style of game he wants to play in the NHL, I agree with you. I think a big part of that is he's going to have to bulk up because it's not just going to be Morgan Riley going after him. Like Ridley Greg is such a shift disturber that he's going to rub a lot of people the wrong way, which is good if you're an Ottawa Senators fan or Ottawa Senators player, but he's going to have to back it up and some extra pounds, a little extra size would do him some good there.
Let us know in the comments your thoughts on Ridley Greg's last season, expectations going forward, and do you see him as a centerman or on the wing? All right, exit interview for Josh Norris. Unfortunate start to the season, missing all of training camp. Yeah. He was out of practice, couldn't play the home opener. But when he played in the third home game, fourth game of the season, he made everyone forget all about it with 2 goals in that 6-1 beatdown. We're like, oh my goodness, Josh Norris is so back. Unfortunately, he didn't stay back for the whole season, ultimately having to go down for another shoulder surgery. How would you describe the season that was for number 9, Noof, this season?
It's so tough, Ross, because he does get 50 games, so a little more than you usually get with Josh Norris when he gets that shoulder injury. So a decent sample size, but for this team to be successful, they cannot have questions of who's the second line center. It's not going to work. I feel very confident in saying that either they need Josh Norris to be healthy more often, or they need to find an option or move him to the wing, which we could get to, or they need to find an external option that can be a consistent second line center. Because the way this team is set up and the way this roster is designed, losing that piece just throws the whole lineup into disarray and no one can figure things out. And when you have young developing players like Ridley Greg, you can't have him going from being a first line center all the way down to the fourth line winger in the same season. You just can't have that up and down progress for a guy like Ridley. So for Josh Norris, 50 games, 16 goals, 14 assists, a -6. I think the key thing for Josh Norris, Ross, and this is what I've been looking at here, is on the power play. Josh Norris only scored 5 power play goals in 50 games. He only had 33 power play shots. Now, his shooting percentage was 15.1 on the power play, so you don't hate that. That's great. You want him to stick around that level. But a couple of years ago, he was above 20% shooting success rate, and he was among the leaders in the NHL for power play goals. And for some reason, and this is why I'm harping on the assistant coach need to be better for the Sens, for some reason, they could not set up the power play in a way that had him taking one-timers from his office. And Ross, I can't believe you and I still have hair, as I was going to pull my hair out of my scalp watching a power play where Josh Norris was on the left side and not being teed up for one time. Like, I honestly could not fathom. Even I would have rather, Ross, them kept feeding him and it not resulting in goals as much as usual than put him on the offside, because maybe this is a hyperbole, but I felt like Josh Norris was useless on the power play when he wasn't in that one-time spot. So that's going to be the key for him, is he needs to be taking one-timers on the power play.
Has to. I love that. I think that's the most important thing about next season for Josh Norris, is to put him in a position to succeed. Now, whether that's on the wing or at center, I think is going to be a very hot topic going into training camp, not only because he's legitimately injured his shoulder taking a face-off before, but also because his shot is his number one weapon, and opening that up is the most important thing. He missed 32 games this season, Pilsy, and he finished 5th on the team in goals. Like, he's still a shooter. He's still a guy who can put the puck in the net. Yep. He just needs to be put in better situations. He was also an up-and-coming stud defensive forward.
Yep.
The shoulder injuries have kind of brought that back a little bit. 44% of the expected goals at 5-on-5 when he was on the ice. But like 30 points in 50 games, like points per game, that's like right with Shane Pinto, who we kept saying had a great season.
Yep.
So with all the room to grow, there is still a ton of potential with Josh Norris. It's just like in NHL, you know how they have the video game where it's like what his potential in, but then it's high, medium, low. It used to be high, and now it's probably low about how likely he is to be able to consistently produce that. Yep. I still have belief in him. He seems like such a good dude. He seems like a guy who just has a great head on his shoulders, a real thinker. And I think that he wants it. And you can tell it's really affecting him that he can't. Like, how hard is that? Like, it's not that you just won't do it. It's you physically cannot. So let's hope that this shoulder surgery went well and that he's able to come out 100%, because it was such a nothing play. He was going around the net in Nashville and he hit the backside of the net and he went down and the season's ended just like that. So I feel awful for it, but where would you put him? Let's say he's healthy. Day one of training camp. Like, is he a guy that you have to wait and see how they build out the roster around him? Or do you kind of know where you'd slot him?
There's two options here, and I think both could be interesting, and it depends on what they do on defense, how much money they free up here. But I believe, Ross, and I'm glad you have a similar thought process, that moving Josh Norris to the wing could solve a lot of problems for this team roster-wise, because then they're not relying on him to be the second-line center. You can have Shane Pinto, hopefully, evolve into that role. He spent time there before, but now you can label him as the second line center. And then if you move Norris to the wing, now you can have Ridley Greg as your third line center. And now you don't need a top six winger. Like if you have a top six of, let's say, Brady, Pinto, Batherson, and then Norris, Timmy, Giroux. You could run that as a top six. Now, I'm not saying that's the perfect way to set it up, but you could do that. And then you just need a third line winger, because now you've got a third line of Ridley Greg and Joseph. Now you probably just want a veteran, defensively responsible winger to go on that left side, and you've got a great top nine right there. So if Norris would be open to that, and if the Sens are willing to make that kind of experiment, I think that could be a route you go, or you just keep it as is and you need to find a top six winger to play with Timmy and Claude Giroux, right? So there's a couple options here, and I think both those work. And the thing is, Ross, and I'll credit you here because you and I had a back and forth debate when Josh Norris was trying to get into the lineup to start the season. I said, don't have him taking faceoffs. That's where he gets injured. Protect him. And you said, nope, have him do faceoffs, and he can't do it, then he can't do it, and that's fine. But at least we know. Well, Josh Norris, despite only playing 50 games, he was second on the team in faceoffs, only behind Claude Giroux. Now, the drop-off is massive. Claude Giroux had 1,100 faceoffs. Josh Norris second with 629. But he's the kind of guy where you could put Josh Norris with a Shane Pinto or a Ridley Greg, and he can take draws. Like Claude Giroux leads this team in faceoffs. He's not even a centerman, right? So like this team has guys that are wingers that can help out those young centermen that haven't quite figured out how to take draws in the NHL consistently yet. And Josh Norris can be one of those guys. So honestly, Ross, allow him to take faceoffs, have him taking a one-timer on the power play, and don't put too much responsibility on him. I think those are the three things that can help Norris be successful next season.
What, maybe he's the third line center to start next season?
I don't know if I would go that way, Ross. I guess more I was saying move him to the wing so that there's less responsibility on him than having him to be that kind of crucial second line center pivot there. But you could do that. Like if this team was loaded top six and was very bad in the bottom six. So if you want to spread the wealth and get a nice even top nine and roll these guys and create more even ice time, that's something I could consider as well.
Let us know in the comments what you would recommend for the future of Josh Norris and the Ottawa Senators. Norris finishes last season with 50 games, 30 points, 16 goals, -6 rating, but a guy who has the potential to be a game-changing type talent for the Ottawa Senators. I'm curious what the people think, whether it's center or wing. Citizens, let us know in the comments on YouTube what you think the best route forward is for Josh Norris. All right, Pillsy, wrapping up today's show. Any final thoughts?
And getting back into playoff hockey here, I think it's going to be a close game, but I honestly think, Ross, this game could decide the series. So this is of utmost importance. The Belleville Senators need to win this game. And in my opinion, they've been the better of the two teams in both games. Now, a much closer series than it was up against the Marlies. Belleville Senators took the Marlies to school. John Gruden, maybe get back to the drawing board and figure things out. But up against the Monsters, this is a well, even matched battle here. So I think we're going to see another 1-goal game, but I think Belleville takes the edge this time.
Looking forward to chatting about it tomorrow and a top 8 mock draft. So we'll see what we just missed after the Senators pick at 7. We love the mock drafts. We're going to do 2 post lottery right before the draft. That's how we do it here on LOSP. Appreciate everybody for liking, following, subscribing on Twitter as well at Sens Central, on Instagram, LockedOn.Senators. For today, we say goodbye. For Brandon Piller, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been another edition of the Locked On Senators podcast. Your team every day.